podcast where we talk to smart people, but not necessarily done by smart people?
That is an awesome question.
This one goes down probably on one of my top 5.
Hey, I like nutrition. I like to eat food.
This is the coolest thing ever. We're going to do this forever.
I wish I paid more attention in that class.
You know, I'm going to be honest, I don't understand that. As a man, I don't get it.
Welcome to smartpeoplepodcast.com.
Hello and welcome to Smart People Podcast, conversations that satisfy your curious mind. I'm Chris Stemp. Thanks so much for tuning in today and checking us out. We got a great one for you today. I'm really excited to bring you this guest because he's utilizing business for a purpose, right? But to not just the purpose of profitability, which we, especially today, we just associate capitalism and for-profit entities with exactly that, profit. And what our guest is doing is he launched a business that he believes can both be profitable, it can operate and really excel in the capitalistic society, and also change the world for the positive. And you can truly hear in his voice and see in his background and his life that this isn't just a story, right? He's not just trying to create a nice message that we will carry on and we'll go use this business, this service. It's something he's dedicated his life to. So this week we are interviewing Adam Werbach. And Adam is an environmental activist, an author, and an entrepreneur. In 1996, he became the youngest person ever elected as the national president of the Sierra Club. He was 23 years old. He's the author of books Act Now, Apologize Later, and Strategy for Sustainability, a Business Manifesto. And just a few years ago, Adam launched his latest venture, which is Yerdle. That's Yerdle, Y-E-R-D-L-E. We're going to talk a lot about what Yerdle is, so I don't need to go into it too much, but essentially it's a way to buy and sell used goods without money ever changing hands. And the idea is, let's just consume less new stuff. I mean, when you think about it, we are a country of just waste. If it's not brand new, it's not good enough for us, right? That's the American motto. And look, I'm not saying I don't ever think that way or feel that way, but that's why this episode really opened my eyes. And it's also why I love what Yerdle's doing, and I was happy to have Adam on the show. So we're going to spend the first part of the episode just learning about his background, which is really fascinating. As I mentioned, youngest president of the Sierra Club ever. He really had a passion for sustainability and cleaning up the environment and activism since he was 13, and he began donating to Greenpeace. So it's a fantastic story. We talk about kind of the background and the methodology and the mindset in the beginning of the episode, and then how that transitioned into a company that is changing the way we do business, changing the way we buy things. So I'm going to turn it over here to Adam in a moment. Thanks again so much for tuning in. Don't forget, we are at smartpeoplepodcast.com. You can subscribe on iTunes, or if you just go to our website, there's a big subscribe button up there. Sign up for the newsletter. That's where we send out special articles, quotes, recommendations, things like that. Really just being part of the community. A lot of good stuff over there. You can connect with us on Twitter at smartpeoplepod. All right, here it is, your interview with the founder of Yerdle, Adam Werbach. Well, Adam, thanks so much for being on the show. Really excited to talk to you today and learn about your company Yerdle, as well as a little bit more about your background. So thanks so much.
That's great to be with you.
So the first thing I want to kind of jump into is, as I was doing my research and realized that you are the youngest president ever of the Sierra Club, which in and of itself is a really interesting factor that I want to talk about. But first and foremost, have you always been passionate about sustainability? And if so, what aspect?
Well, I think I have been bitten by the bug from a very early age. And that bug is that I have a belief that I can do something about the world. And it seems pretty simple, but that belief in self-efficacy, that even though have been a young activist, I can actually make a difference. That single notion has propelled me a long way, and it really all came back from when I was just a kid. I found this petition to oust James Watt. He was the Secretary of the Interior under Ronald Reagan. On my parents' table. And on that particular day, we were learning how to sign our name. This was like second grade. So I brought the petition in as my kind of show and tell for how to sign your name. And everyone signed their name. And my teachers were really impressed. And it was super fun to get all of the sort of the support for doing that. And then I went around to the rest of the school and had everyone else sign their name. And pretty soon we had about 200 signatures on that petition. And that petition, along with a million others, basically helped get Watt thrown out of office. And that being part of something that big, even though I was so young, struck me as remarkable. I couldn't vote, I couldn't rent a car, I didn't have a bank account, but I could make a difference, and that really bit me.
What's interesting about that is, aside from being able to do that, is just having the ability and the passion to even carry through on that at a young age. I think about myself and most normal kids that I know, and even if I had the opportunity, I don't know if I would have went down that route. I was too busy trying to figure out what this whole life thing was about, and having different crushes on girls and playing sports. So, what do you attribute this need or want to benefit society? What do you attribute that to?
I suppose my parents and I think just good old fashioned organizing. The credo of an organizer is to meet someone where they're at, and there could be no better moment of a second grader trying to learn how to sign his name and a petition that just needed second graders to sign their names. So it was a brilliant piece of organizing that the Sierra Club pulled off at that time, and I think that sort of struck me since that time, because what I've sort of been searching for ever since then is what is a similar thing? What is a similar thing that will spark people, regardless of their age or their wealth or their political background, into doing something that will actually make a difference on the planet? So I don't think I was that remarkable. I think more fitting it was that I just had the opportunity and I took it.
Yeah, I think for me at least, the thing that strikes me is just the age at which you started. Because I feel like, and I actually read a book about this recently, but how oftentimes people start to realize that they get this passion from believing in things and doing things larger than themselves, but it tends to come later in life after you first figure out a little bit more about yourself. So I think that's kind of one of the most intriguing aspects, is the age in which you started,
Well, and that's sort of one of our goals has to be to get kids to believe that they don't need to go through training to be citizens. And there's so many institutions, and I don't mean to harp on them, but things like the Model United Nations, or they're just getting ready for the world instead of confronting the world. And right now, we need. Kids have the type of future values baked into them already. They don't have the sort of retrograde values that I probably have embedded in me, or my parents did in them, or their parents, which are were definitely good, hearty values that help build a nation. But in terms of surviving in the 21st century, understanding about the benefits of having a diverse set of opinions in the room, understanding that the challenges of inequality are will make our country live or die, and understanding that climate change is an existential risk or an incredible opportunity for us. Those sorts of ideas are not obscure or forward. They're just what everyone who's a millennial believes right now.
I want to get a little bit more into kind of the Sierra Club, but while you mentioned this last topic, it just struck me. And if you don't feel like answering it or whatever, let me know. But I was wondering, as we look at the political debates, and A, if you know what candidate you're going to vote for, and B, assuming, and I could be assuming wrong, but you're more of a liberal or a Democrat, how do you deal with the fact that you're also a CEO of a company, a tech company that we're going to talk about? You're probably going to have to pay more taxes under a Democrat. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm supporting Hillary Clinton. I just think she's about the most qualified person there ever has been to be president, and I'm excited for her to be it. It's incredible that we're going to put her through a ringer as we have her entire career. to get there. And I certainly have probably a huge number of my friends who support Bernie Sanders, who I love. I've known for a long time and support a lot of his positions. But I just think in terms of who will be the best president, I think she'll be it. In terms of taxes or those things, I guess I just believe that taxes are what you pay to be part of society. So I've always been very proud to pay them. And, I think right now that the question of whether we'll be successful in society, my kids will, is whether we're actually going to be able to have an equal society. And my taxes and paying them is my direct contribution to trying to build equality into our nation.
Well, and that's oftentimes, that is, when it comes to taxes, the approach I take. And look, I don't need to go down this rabbit hole, but I think the lens in which you look at it through is so interesting, given your position as an entrepreneur and within a company where I would imagine, you will be or plan to be paying more taxes than the average person and whatnot, and it affects the bottom line. Does that weigh in on your decision at all in your role as a CEO, as opposed to just somebody who perhaps has a job and pays the standard taxes?
No, I think we want to pay more taxes. We want to get bigger so that we can. We want to have a bigger effect on society, and one of the ways we can do it is through tax policy. One of the challenges that there are some businesses in the sharing economy that have been a bit slow to embrace their tax burdens, and this is really in hoteling like Airbnb and cars like Uber and Lyft, and they vary a lot in terms of how they've responded. But in terms of what we do, which is basically move things back and forth between people, the tax situation in our economic policy is all built around selling more things. The economy is good when we sell more things. And there's something profoundly wrong about that, because what we should be mapping is productivity, not production. And that change will have a profound effect on how we pay taxes. And I think that I'm very interested in being a part of that. But I would love that to be an extraordinarily high burden on us, because it means that we're being successful. Somehow schools are going to have to get paid for, roads are going to have to get paid for, and companies should be a big part of that.
I love that. And this is something that so many people miss, right? They complain about, like, for example, the county I'm in only has a half-day kindergarten, and it is the richest county in the country. And, people complain about the traffic or potholes, like you said, but in the same breath, we'll talk about how they don't want to pay taxes or how their tax rate's too high. And it just blows my mind, because I think people never put the two together. Or at least, I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it.
Well, there's not a belief in governance. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And it's the internal battle happening within the Republican Party right now, that, there's just this belief that the best thing we can do, and, Grover Norquist's famous quote is that I want to make government so small that I can put it into a bathtub and drown it. That is the gold standard of conservative Republican anti-tax thinking right now. And it's, if you do drive on roads and you do rely on the court system and you do want to travel and have a passport, you're going to need to pay taxes. And, ideally you want a government that works really, really well and spends that money really efficiently. And could we be more efficient? Absolutely. I really do support a lot of the kind of technology efforts that have been going on recently to improve the function of governance. But, you're still arguing, some of us want to make government better and some people just want to kill government. And, it's hard to convince them they should be spending taxes.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Well, thanks for going down that rabbit hole with me. It was just something that popped up. But I want to talk about the Sierra Club a little bit. So tell us a little bit. You were the youngest ever president. So tell us, for those that don't know, what the Sierra Club does, how you became president of it, and then what that entailed. I know that's a lot, but want to hear about that experience.
Well, the Sierra Club is the oldest and largest grassroots environmental organization. It was founded in 1892 with the help of John Muir, and it's been involved in most of the largest kind of land preservation and environmental battles since that time. It is also a hiking organization, and it takes hundreds of thousands of people out hiking every year in their local areas. So I got involved basically by helping to start their student program, which is called the Sierra Student Coalition. And in high school, I had sort of continued being active. I became a vegetarian. I was kind of reading up a lot. And I got drafted into what was called the Big Green Initiative, which was a big ballot initiative in the state of California to passed new mileage protection or sort of new energy efficiency goals to protect redwood forests and a whole bunch of things, sort of the whole enchilada. And I just walked into the headquarters and said, "Can I help?" And they said, "Well, do you know any other high school students?" I said, "Sure." I had my friends. So they had me calling other high school kids, which I did all over the state of California. And in those 2 weeks, we ended up with 300 volunteers. And we got crushed. The election, it was just like one of those ones which it wasn't even close. Although it was very exciting for us because we were doing something. And, at the day after, the students just sort of called me up and said, "What are we doing next?" And I said, "I don't know." So I sort of called all the environmental groups and said, "I have 300 high school students who want to do something. What do you want to do with them?" And for whatever reason, none of the organizations either called me back or were interested except the Sierra Club, who invited me to come to a meeting and then basically said, "What do you want to do with them?" I said, I don't know. Maybe we should train them. So they gave me a budget of $200 in a lodge they have up in Mount Baldy. And I ran a training with high school students on how to be high school environmental organizers, even though I was a high school student myself. And pretty much all those students sort of kept with it. And when we graduated, they all took the idea to their colleges. And within a year, we had 30,000 members across the U.S. working on big pieces of legislation. So that's sort of the formation. And then the Sierra Club kind of found out about it later because we were working out of a little part of the Los Angeles chapter. And all of a sudden we were this sort of national organization. So they invited us to San Francisco to shut it down because we were infringing on their trademark. And one very wise leader, his name was Ed Wayburn, pointed out that perhaps we shouldn't be killing the student movement, but in fact supporting it. And when that happened, it kind of flipped. And I became... I was actually put on the board of directors and eventually was supported by a legendary environmentalist named David Brower to become the president after I graduated college.
And how old? So you're like 21, something like that?
I was 23.
So you're 23. Essentially, as the president, you run this national organization with, I don't know, now I think it's got like 2 million members or so. So I don't know how many at the time, but obviously a lot. I imagine that people on your board, people that worked with you, et cetera, were a lot older than you. Did that ever strike you? Did you ever have any insecurities? What was that like?
I mean, in some parts it was terrifying. It was subtly always embarrassing. Like I remember going to, kind of presidential campaigns and I couldn't even, events and I couldn't even, during the elections, and I couldn't even rent a car. I was like, I wasn't 25 yet. It seemed ridiculous. And I would go to events and like I would be carded and not labeled to come in, like fundraisers that I was running. So there was all sorts of small insults to young people, and frequently just kind of walked to the intern door as opposed to the big kids door. But ultimately, I think actually not knowing a lot about nonprofit management at the time, and not knowing about political realities, like this is why these things don't work, allowed me to just go, and to do the things that I knew how to do. So I traveled a ton. I went to every local chapter and really reached out to young people. I mean, and to give you a sense, like in the first few years I was there, we were able to lower the average age of a member of the Sierra Club by a decade.
Wow.
And that's just because no one had really reached out to young people recently and said, "Hey, this is your world, and we want you as members." I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of actually being able to support.
So what is your view towards younger? I mean, I don't want to say younger people in general. I kind of am looking, more towards now that you run a company, and I'm sure you have 21-year-olds coming in, you probably have 30, I don't know, 40. What are your views on, say, ambition and passion versus experience?
So I'll start with I guess I've always believed in the power of young people to achieve extraordinary things. I think I understand it more as being a spirit as opposed to a particular age, if that makes sense now. But I remember as a college student, I was incredibly frustrated when, people who were in their 20s considered themselves young people. And as a high school student, I hated when college students, said that they were the young people. Like I just tend to trust whoever's youngest in the room to be able to express what they want and go. There's no reason to stop. Like if you don't have the experience, that's just not a good enough reason to not step forward. And the joy of YouTube and Google and, being able to find anything, anytime is that you can be as qualified to sit in that room as anyone around the table if you do your homework. So I tend to be pretty impatient with younger people and just expect them to play along and to lead. And I don't really care that they don't have 15 years of experience. I just expect them to. I expect them to lead, and if they can't, well then then they've got to move on.
Right. That's interesting. Now let's take a quick break for a message from our longest standing sponsor and a true supporter of Smart People Podcast, lynda.com. As you guys must know by now, lynda.com is an amazing online learning platform. Lynda.com is used by millions of people around the world and has over 3,000 courses on a variety of topics such as web development, visual design, business, software, how to do Photoshop or WordPress, all the stuff you need to know. And all of their courses are taught by experts. Something here at Smart People Podcast, we dig. So whether you want to set new financial goals, find work-life balance, or invest in a new hobby, lynda.com has something for everyone. So sign up for your free 10-day trial today by visiting lynda.com/smartpeople. When you go there, you'll get unlimited access to every single course on lynda.com. Some of the courses and videos I recommend range from things like getting things done, which is an actual course, and breaking out of a rut, to the more specific courses like the Excel course, which many of us need to use in our day-to-day life, or photography classes. So do something good for yourself this holiday season and sign up for a free 10-day trial to lynda.com. So go to lynda.com/smartpeople and learn something new. Now back to the show. Oh, by the way, I read that you had something to do with the formation of Joshua Tree National Park.
One of my favorite places in the world.
Yes, holds such a meaningful place in my heart. When I read that, I was like, oh, I have to tell him. First of all, thank you. Second of all, I want to know how you did that. But because my brother lives in LA and he's loves we both love camping, and I'll never forget, when he moved out there, I was maybe 18-ish or something. He's early 20s. He said, you got to come to this park. And I was like, what is it? He's like, well, it's kind of in the desert, but they have these cool trees. And I'm thinking, that doesn't sound that fun. Like, that just sounds weird. And we went, and for some reason, just a magical place. So how did that come about? What'd you do with that?
Well, when I was in my teens, I was feeling pretty isolated. Just, I wasn't on the football team, and I was an environmentalist, and I was working for trying to pass laws and those sorts of things. And I met this really remarkable man named Eldon Hughes, who was spending every weekend or every waking moment mapping the desert, the California desert. And he, along with Judy Anderson and Jim Dodson, every weekend we would just go out and just find places that weren't protected and draw them onto maps. He had an old Bronco, orange Bronco. We used to go everywhere in. And that was just the way I spent my weekends and my evenings, and just going out into the desert. And what I learned was that the California desert was remarkably unprotected, that Death Valley, the East Mojave, and Joshua Tree in particular were being mined, were being developed, and were really being destroyed, and no one seemed to care about them. That when I would go and start talking and lobbying on them, everyone who hadn't been there would describe them as sort of the places where we get kitty litter. They just couldn't see them as like anything majestic, and they sort of saw them as sacrifice zones for military or whatever, just not important. So, my job was on mapping, and then when we got to the point of, it was a 10, 12-year battle to actually getting to a political battle and trying to get the votes we needed, the Sierra Student Coalition kind of set up to find ways to get senators who were blocking it to change. And, those tactics were things like, there's like 3 senators in the Southeast who were opposing it. And one of our student activists figured out where their kids went to college and, made sure we had organizations in those schools and did these things that we call dorm storms, which is, you basically got some music and some beer and a bunch of fun people, and you go into a dorm and get everyone excited about an issue. And we dorm stormed the heck out of those campuses. And it was pretty remarkable, but all those votes changed in a period of about 6 weeks without even direct contact with the daughters. People found out because we put pressure on them. So it was just, we were just solving with whatever we knew how to do. The California desert was important to me and to Stephanie Jowers, this one student who figured out the strategy. She had never been in the California desert, but she had a place she wanted to protect. So if she could help me with this, then I could help her with that.
Well, why should we care about protecting, say, the California desert, as opposed to, I mean, it's easy to be like, we're destroying rainforest. Okay, I get that. But a bunch of sand and some weird looking trees, why worry about it?
Well, you have to start with to my mind, an appreciation of wildness and wilderness. Henry David Thoreau said that in wildness is the preservation of the world. And I believe that there's something that is natural about us, about our humanity, that only really gets enlivened when it's in a wild place. When I was born, about 2% of the planet was left in wilderness, and we're probably closer to 1% right now. And it's being destroyed at an awfully fast clip. And when you destroy nature and natural places, it's like tearing pages out of the Earth's operating manual and just destroying them. Before we even know what the value is, what we can learn from them. So a place like the California desert has obviously sort of this sort of Pandora's box of beauty that is interesting and enlivening. But it also, for me, it's a place where you can just be. There's nothing like being in Slick Rock and Canyon and looking and seeing nothing human. For what it does to reconnect you and your soul to the planet, there's just nothing like it.
Personally, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's why my restart button is camping. Usually in the woods, preferably by some body of water, as small as, But my thing, I auditioned for a TEDx talk about this. I didn't get it, but one day I will. But it was kind of, I think it takes nature to make us realize how small we are, and then we can put things into perspective. And I love that.
Richard, there's a writer named Richard Louv who talks about nature deficit disorder. And says that when humans are outside and not having that sort of chloroform hit, that they really do suffer. And the research pretty much shows, that we need to have that. For me, it is definitely being around green. I know that affects my mood and how I feel, etc. Mm-hmm. But it's also about being in wide open spaces. And like you said, to sort of put ourselves in perspective to something much larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. So now you run a company, a tech startup, I believe, and I know a little bit about it, not a ton, which I want to hear about, but I want to know why the transition. I mean, say you're running potentially the most powerful nature preserving nonprofit, whatever you want to call it, in the world, and probably have a lot of influence. Why go into business and tech for that matter?
Well, as I said, it was an incredible privilege to be able to work at the Sierra Club. There's an extraordinary professional staff there. There's amazing volunteers everywhere, and they're still there. I mean, it's there. It's growing. It's stronger than ever. I mean, for example, there's not been a new coal-fired power plant in the United States built largely because of the Sierra Club's campaigns to keep that coal in the ground and not burning into our lungs and the climate. But for me, the frustration that I've had with the environmental movement in general is that, essentially we haven't been working at the pace of climate change. And it's not the Sierra Club per se. I think that they're doing an extraordinary job. It's just as a whole, the political movement has not been fast enough to work at the pace of this existential threat that we face with climate change. And, this isn't a new thought. I was part of the Kyoto Accord negotiations back in 97. And, we knew it then. We knew everything we know now then. And we knew how much time we had and what was at stake. And the challenge is that unlike the 1970s, where there was a societal agreement that something is wrong. I mean, in the early 1970s, late 60s, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio lit on fire and burned for days. It was an American spectacle, and people just knew, wow, we just can't do this. We can't have rivers burning and sort of biblical events. We have to pass the Clean Water Act. when the bald eagle, the symbol of America, was on the endangered species, was on the verge of extinction, we knew we needed an Endangered Species Act. It just was something that all Americans could actually rally behind and understand. I mean, President Nixon, a Republican, signed those bills into law. Well, now count 30 years later, 40 years later, and that widespread agreement has folded. It doesn't exist. And the work that I've done since the Sierra Club has really been trying to figure out, how do we actually reach more people? How do we do it beyond the people who are ready to sign up and join the fight? How do we get people to understand that these values are not some fringe thing that's good for college towns and coastal towns? This is something that all of us need and require, and that's really what sort of led me on the journey since then.
Do you find that people are more willing to support a cause that's, I want to say, externally motivated, but I don't know if that's the right word. It's just, or phrase, what's coming to me. But so the bald eagle, right? Oh my gosh, it's an animal and it's America. We got to fix it, right? Or water. This is a resource that we need to fix. But when you say climate change, I think it's so broad. It doesn't have a symbol almost. And I don't know. I just don't know if people attach the emotional value, knowing full well that it could be our destruction. Do you think it's messaging? Do you think, what is the holdup in terms of, I mean, there are still people who believe that it's not happening.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? I mean, it's a very challenging problem for our political system to solve, because it lasts longer than one Congress or one president. It takes, I mean, it is trillions of dollars of investment changing over a period of decades. It's cross-national and cross-border. It affects everyone, and we're all starting at different places. So it's a really wicked problem, which we have to acknowledge. However, it's here, and the fact that it's challenging, unfortunately, can't be an excuse for us to not act on it. Mm-hmm. What we see more and more is that the realities are just here. There's a huge Hurricane Patricia heading towards Mexico right now.
Yep.
This summer, we watched the Olympic rainforest burn. Rainforests don't burn, but this burn. It's that way. We're in the middle of a reef bleaching event on the planet that, we've seen reef bleaching events before. In the late 1990s, we saw 18% of coral reefs on the planet bleach. Well, now we estimate that we're going to hit 38% of all the reef on planet Earth will bleach. And reefs are just like rainforests. They're not things we should be messing with and losing from our ecosystem. 25% of marine life exists around the coral reefs. So these things they're happening. If you live in Vermont, you had a horrible sugar season, and that maple syrup is not going to be coming from Vermont for much longer. It's already moved to New Hampshire, and it's a Canadian crop, because maple syrup is just, maple trees, sugar maple trees are on a more northern climb. Mm. So, we can go over the lists of things, and at this point, I don't, it's hard to find people who don't kind of acknowledge those.
Right.
The challenge, I think, is that we've just had an active deception campaign going on, and there's some new research or investigative reporting about what Exxon knew when. But as early as the late 70s and early 80s, Exxon was doing cutting edge research on climate change and had come to the conclusion that their pollution was causing it, and it would get bad and worse. And at the same time, they were and have been funding climate deniers and climate science, anti-climate science, to try to prove something else. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll be seen. We'll look at that as a crime against humanity. How one corporation, one very, very wealthy corporation, really destroyed a scientific consensus, or tried to, and delayed action for 20 years.
Wow. Well, and that's an interesting transition, because as I mentioned, I want to talk about Yertle. And given we've learned now about your background, your passions and sustainability, the nonprofit, Sierra Club, to go into a for-profit as a startup, working in, or launching in Silicon Valley and all that, it has this connotation of wealth, right? Of let's raise all this money. Let's create something, especially in the tech world. Let's try to IPO, make a ton of money. You know, as we talk about Exxon, a wealthy corporation that's obviously primary goal is the bottom line. It's almost interesting. How do you feel you can merge for-profit entity with your passions in obviously bettering the social good?
Well, I think companies have a huge role to play here, and you know, the business format is or the entity format. I think it's just another tool to be hacking and playing with. So we're set up as a California benefit corporation, which is a specific part of California law, which for us says that our mission is our top goal. It's even higher than our profit motive, which obviously, if we are not profitable, we will not exist. But the concern with a lot of startups was that that essentially you'd be facing some sort of liquidity event, and your investors would force you to sell for the highest dollar as opposed to doing the best thing for the mission. And our mission is to reduce the number of new things we all have to buy by 25%. So that gives us kind of a structural guarantee, as much as we can have, that we won't be forced into doing it. The question will, of course, be can we build a successful enterprise? Because a successful enterprise will actually be able to push back on whatever investor or anyone else asks you. I mean, it turns out we've been able to pull out really mission-aligned investors who've invested in us, and they don't ever say do less for the environment, or
wow.
They don't say that. But our challenge, of course, and this is the challenge of being in a venture capital backed company, is that it has to grow. And if you are queasy about growth, which a lot of us are, that's a hard challenge. But the people who are investing in us, and us as well, we're betting on becoming something very large, because that's the only way that the economics pay off.
It's interesting. So it is this alignment almost, right? It's like the investors want you to grow, but then you personally want it to grow because obviously the more it grows, the more impact you'll have. Where I feel like oftentimes, especially when you are looking in the tech space specifically, and with all of the just iterations that are happening, and not that Yurtle is that, I really enjoy what I know of it, and I want to talk about that. But, you also have the 19th Snapchat, and, people just trying to make a buck, and the investors are just grow to as many users as possible and let's sell. Where your model is, look, we can align both good and, wealth or investment or return on investment.
Yeah. I mean, so the idea behind Yurtle is that we have trillions of dollars of usable goods stuck in our closets and garages. And if we just got those moving between people, we wouldn't only save people lots and lots of money and require them to work less to earn that money, but we'd also do something great for the climate. We would not have to produce all of those items when you need one. If you need a pair of shin guards for your son's soccer practice, well, chances are one of your neighbors has one that's in their garage right now. If you need a special jacket for a ski trip, there's chances are that a neighbor or a friend or someone on Yurtle has that jacket, and you don't need to go get a new one, which means you can get it faster, you can get it for a lot less money, and that whole thing didn't need to get produced and shipped and transported and packaged and resent and all the things that our modern supply chains produce. So starting with an idea that obviously has a core environmental benefit helps, right? If I was actually just trying to do a link clicking application and set that up as a California benefit corporation, it would be hard. You'd have to that's where you get sort of the 10%. We'll do something not great in our core business, but we'll give 10% of our profits to good things. And you sort of see businesses that do that. Mm-hmm. But what I kind of believe is that a truly sustainable business is 100% for its mission, that everything it does resupports that mission, and that mission has to be bigger than just making the owners of the business rich. It has to be about something broader than that.
And now a quick word from this week's sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by Igloo. Igloo is an intranet you'll actually like. It's a solution that can help you and your team do your best work. Share files, blog updates, coordinate calendars, and manage projects. It's easy to use and easy to configure, even for the most non-technical of users, so everyone in your company can use it. And it works on mobile, so you can access your files whenever you need them. Whether you're a large enterprise stuck using SharePoint or a fast-growing business overwhelmed by apps, create an intranet that matches your brand's look and feel, simplifies how you work, and is accessible on your phone. Sign up now and try it out for free at igloosoftware.com/smartpeople. That's igloosoftware.com/smartpeople. And now back to the show.
I mean, I love that belief. Do you feel like that belief is shared amongst other owners, CEOs, founders, especially in Silicon Valley?
I'm pausing. So I'm recruiting. So hopefully people listening to this will become those people. It's not. I would say it's not the majority of. We're in the midst of a gold rush, but and that's always a very discomforting experience. So people who a few years ago might have gone to Wall Street or coming out to San Francisco to start their tech businesses, and if you were heading toward banking or consulting and you were just trying to maximize your wealth, you're not necessarily looking for a way to benefit society while you're doing that. What I am trying to get across to people who are activists who would be working for a nonprofit is that there's an extraordinary tool set here and extraordinary opportunity. It's easier to raise money in this way than raising it for a nonprofit. It just is. So why not take advantage of that and build something that satisfies two requirements? That, yes, builds a profitable enterprise, but in the process actually gets that mission achieved. And there are, it's not no one. There are organizations and entities out there who are doing that. There's a nice company called Scoot that I like a lot, which is it's an electric kind of Vespa rental company all around San Francisco, where you can rent a Vespa and just take it for a short ride. It's alternative transportation. It's pollutionless. And similarly, the people there, I worked with some of them at the Sierra Club, are just trying to do the right thing and do it through tech. And so I think in the same way that we embraced lobbying or embraced grassroots organizing, I think we need to embrace technological innovation as a venue for activism.
I absolutely love the way you just put that. And here's why. As the listeners know, I helped found a nonprofit, and I currently work for it in a VP role. And really the founder, I just say helped found, I'm not a co-founder, but the founder used to work with Elon Musk at SpaceX. Our mission is to increase the consumption of healthful and sustainable food. We all come from a business background, everyone kind of in the management arm, I guess, if you will. It is impossible to get the resources needed to grow quickly. I mean, and we often talk like, if we could go back to the beginning, would we have started this as a for-profit? And I don't know what the answer is, but I can say that it would have been easier to raise money. And for those out there, that might not be a noticeable distinction, especially in the world we live in now, and the ability to fundraise. It's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, I wish more people would take the opportunity to try and fail at it too. I mean, it's small. I mean, your question was a good one. Like, so are there a lot of folks out there? And the answer is no. There's some, and I love them. But we need more people. But I could throw a rock and hit someone starting a small nonprofit in San Francisco. I mean, that is the way that people tend to do something and search for foundation funding and individual donors and build. And those are all great. And I don't mean to discourage that. We need that. And there are particularly things that is the right solution for. But there are other ideas. And I think this is where we get to tech and communications and lifestyle, where you can do a lot through technology. And it's not just the fundraising, it's also the kind of the operating principles. And not to be too reductive, but an agile development process and framework where you embrace failure, you're constantly experimenting, you are evaluating every link in the chain to see if it's working, you're checking back into data constantly and sharing that data openly with your team. Those are values that don't particularly exist in spades in the nonprofit world.
Sure.
And yet every tech startup uses something like Slack to communicate internally. Every tech startup uses something like Gecko Board to share internal data. Every tech startup has someone who in a product manager role who's embracing failure and encouraging people to do it. And when I go to nonprofits, failure is people can't afford to fail. You just can't afford to do that because it's all at risk. Data is really hard to come by, and actually people tend to be very protective of it. And there's not a lot of rapid iteration. There's a lot of planning for things that happen in 6 months, and next big initiatives. But putting out something the next day, changing and putting a build out the next day, that doesn't happen enough. And again, I'm really painting with a very broad brush and unfair, but it's just like those archetypes exist, and all of us can recognize nonprofits like that. And some of the skills and tools that I see here on my team, I wish I had at the Sierra Club. I want more of that in that zone.
Yeah, I think of course, like you said, it's a broad brush, but I think the greater kind of idea to take away is that people tend to think, if I want to change the world, it's a nonprofit. If I want to make money, it's a for-profit. And you are bridging that gap, as are some other companies, and potentially in a way that's more scalable and beneficial. So I want to dive in more to Yurtle, because you covered it a little bit, but I know the business model still sounds a little vague. So tell us exactly, how do we use it? What is it? What's the benefit, et cetera?
So you use Yurtle to give away what you don't need and get what you do. And you post items that are sitting in your closets, your garage, your trunk, that you may have outgrown or you're no longer using. And you assign a price in Yurtle dollars, which are basically the same. They function just like US dollars. So you say, okay, I'm going to post this set of coffee mugs for 20 Euro dollars. And someone says, oh, I need those coffee mugs. And they buy them from you at 20 Euro dollars. They send you a prepaid mailing label. You put it on a box and send it to them. And they've earned Euro dollars in the same way that everyone else has, just by posting items, or by when you join, you get 25 to start. We moved about 50,000 items last month between people like that. And all of those items didn't need to get produced again. They all saved people lots of money when they arrived, and they didn't need to be packaged again. So there's a kind of a suite of benefits around that. What's extraordinary is just how much stuff we all have. Self-storage didn't even exist as a business until the late 60s, early 70s. And, it's over 2 billion square feet of America is held for self-storage now. It's grown by 1,000% since that time. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And largely that stuff is never accessed again. Americans use only about 20% of their things in their homes more than once a month. Most things just sit. And when you think about this work that we're all working, these jobs we're working to earn more money to get more stuff, it's a little crazy. And we're just trying to provide a solution where you can get what you need, and even better, you can get rid of those things that you don't and put them into people's hands who can really benefit from them.
So what would prevent somebody from telling their friend, hey, I just put a used shoe on Yurtle, buy it from me for $1 million Yurtle dollars so I can then buy a bunch of other stuff? Because there isn't a dollar assigned, right? Do you actually buy Yurtle dollars?
Yeah, I mean, you can, although we don't encourage you to do it. We encourage you to earn them by posting items because it's easier to do. Mm-hmm. So the challenge is that person would need to have 8,000 Euro dollars. Gotcha. They're not created out of nothing. They are created out of activity. And what most people find is that they can very quickly turn whatever they have. I mean, I just got rid of 2 belts that I had for a long time. And they felt great. I got a really nice thank you note from them. I got 10 Euro dollars for each of them. And I'm looking for an alarm clock for my son now because he needs an alarm clock. So it's getting the things that I need. The alarm clock that I'm going to get is going to be much more interesting than the ones I could buy on Amazon right now. And I'm going to save money in the process. So it's very old fashioned, right? I mean,
sure.
People have been giving things back and forth forever, but the informal economy has been suffering in comparison to the get it now type of economy that we've seen form in the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. and where people used to rely on church swap sales and friends and neighbors and sisters, they're more and more relying on the convenience of mass manufactured goods and credit to get those things.
And I mean, the obvious differentiator between, say, Yerdle and Craigslist is there's no actual money that changes hands. What implication does that have on the process in general? Why does, because money essentially back when it started was to prohibit, or I guess not prohibit, but to make it easier to barter, if you will, right? That's just one method. So now, I mean, Yerdle dollars could be considered just another form of money. So how's that differentiate?
Well, I mean, I think you put your finger on it. It intermediates exchange, and it time shifts it. It allows you to say, okay, I'm going to give away these belts, but I don't actually know the person who has the alarm clock that I want, which would be an old-fashioned. But I can give away these belts, earn the Yerdle dollars, and then wait till the alarm clock that I want comes up. When we launched Yerdle, we didn't have a currency on it, even though we were encouraged to, and we thought about it a lot because we were afraid that it would create a weird social dynamic to basically get things from friends with currency. What we found was that actually the currency was what people needed to exchange things with friends and strangers. That people felt much more comfortable when there was a tangible value assigned to something to actually go and get it. So when we had no prices on anything, things just kind of sat there because people would be like, oh, I don't want to get that belt because maybe someone else needs it more. Or if I get that belt from Adam, I'm going to owe him something. I don't want to owe him anything. So the belt would just sit. And then when I said, no, the belt was 10 Yerdle dollars, again, kind of a made up currency, people thought, oh, okay, that seems like a reasonable price and I'm going to get it and I need it. And, it's a fair exchange. So the currency really lubricated the marketplace for us and got it moving much, much more quickly.
I'm just going to throw this out there as a use case. So, for example, I recently moved and I had a patio set and I didn't want it. It was a little old. It still functioned, but it's a new house and I don't know, we don't even have a deck. So I needed to get rid of it. And I hate throwing stuff out. So I put it on Craigslist, but I put it out for free because, I probably could have got, I don't know, 10, 15 bucks, but that just wasn't the point. And somebody came and picked it up and they were so appreciative. It was almost like they were shocked. Like, why are you giving this to me? And just that feeling was better than, honestly, if I sold it for $100 because that didn't matter to me. Now, in the case of Yerdle, I think, okay, I'll put it on there because there are things I need and by no means have a lot of money. So I kind of like that you can almost still feel a sense of social good because you're limiting the footprint that we all have, but you also you can get things in return and there are things I need and I don't need to buy new ones. I like the whole concept.
That's how it's supposed to work. I mean, the giving, it seems very important. I mean, we have a mix of people, right? So, what we're most proud of is that we have just a very broad swath of, what we would call value shoppers, people who clip coupons and are trying to save money and make their budgets work to the end of the month, and this is pretty endemic. I think more than half of Americans at this point are one $400 bill away from basically financial insolvency, having to choose a really hard choice, like not paying for their medicine or their rent for the month. So just finding a tactic to help people save money is enough, if that makes sense, to actually reach a sense of, okay, we're doing something good. But what sort of goes past it is that feeling of putting something that you had into someone else's hands for use is such a strong motivator. It's just what we all kind of expect and should want to have happen. And that's sort of been the most magical for us. There's really deep thank you notes. People tend to decorate their packages and really enjoy giving things away. They enjoy the experience of feeling generous and being generous.
Can you give books away on there?
Yeah.
Books. I have so many books. I mean, we interview authors books upon books. I can't even give them away to our listeners fast enough. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, books work really well. We, our sweet spot is items less than 10 pounds, and most things are shipped between people. And what we're in the process of doing now is, as we get denser, building kind of more local density. So, a thing like a patio set we could move more efficiently.
Right. Yeah. What are any other plans? I know we got to go here in a second, but any growth strategies or anything we should be on the lookout from Yerdle?
Well, what we're doing now is working much more closely with product manufacturers to begin to bring their kind of their supply chains into this new way of working. Patagonia, who's an investor in Yurtle and strong supporter, is launching with us this effort to, if you post something from Patagonia over the holiday on Yurtle, you actually get a discount on something new from Patagonia.
Oh, wow.
Which is a great way of encouraging for them. They just know that the best thing that they can do is get the Patagonia gear out of people's closets and on people's backs. That's the best thing they can do for sustainability. So that's one way we're trying to work with them.
Well, that's incredible. Adam, thanks so much for being on. I wanted to give you a chance to kind of tell people what action can they take. How do they use Yurtle? Where do they find it? What's the sign up? Where do they learn more? All that good stuff.
Yeah, Yurtle is still at the beginning of its story, and we'd love everyone to join us. The best thing to do is to look at something in your closet and take a quick photo of it and put it up on Yurtle. You'll be shocked at how fast it goes to someone who really wants it and needs it. So think about a piece of clothing that you might have that you've outgrown, or think about something small that's in your kitchen that you want to give away. And just try it. Try posting one thing. Go to the App Store, either Android or Apple, and it's www.yerdle.com. Yurtle.
Well, I have about 3 alarm clocks sitting somewhere that I think I'm going to dig up, because there's people like you out there, and I'm happy to give them away.
My son will thank you.
Adam, thank you again so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
All right, have a great day.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Adam Werbach. You can find his books on Amazon and the app Yurtle on the iOS App Store or Android App Store. I actually had a chance to jump on Yurtle and play around a little bit with it, and I'm going to start posting a lot of the stuff that's just sitting around my office and my house. As I'm sitting here recording this podcast, I can see at least 5 or 6 things that I probably haven't touched in, 4 or 5 months. And honestly, they could go to a good home. As always, thank you so much for downloading and listening to this episode of Smart People Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode before this, please head over to iTunes or Stitcher and leave a rating and review over there. We truly do appreciate that each and every time we see feedback for the show. If you'd like to reach out to the show, you can send us an email at smartpeoplepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at smartpeoplepod. We've received a bunch of really cool emails this week, and I've got the chance to connect with a bunch of listeners and have really enjoyed it. So if you've sent an email recently telling a story or just wanting to converse with Chris or I, thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate that. We've got some great episodes coming up, so make sure you stay tuned to all things about the show over at smartpeoplepodcast.com. Keep telling friends and family. That does help the show grow, and we really do appreciate that. And we will see you all next week.